Oh yeah, you like complication, you like messes. The Oilers, they have one on their hands with the handling of the Jesse Puljujarvi situation and what they are going to do at the NHL trade deadline, my friends. And that is, of course, where we find ourselves this afternoon. A Saturday edition of the CJ Show on the Steve Dangle Podcast Network came out today breaking down the Ryan O'Reilly trade and Oilers' interest in Patrick Kane, the Chris Johnston show on the SDPN. But, friends, that is where we find ourselves. There's a couple of takeaways from that podcast today to simply talk about the third party, fourth party, fifth party information that Chris Johnston has picked up in regards to the Oilers coming into this weekend, and we'll talk about that in a matter of moments. But before we get there, friends, if you're new to the channel, just a quick mention to you, or if you're returning for your second, third video and haven't done it yet, make sure to, if you could, after this video, hit the subscribe button. If you're feeling like Dolany TV is going to be a place you want to get Oilers news, I'd appreciate you sticking around. We are literally on the cusp of 10,700 subscribers, which means we are literally right there almost to 11,000. Absolutely crazy. Anyway, friends, you don't get it if you don't ask, so that's why I'm doing it. But where are we going? Where are we going? We are going to Jesse Puljujarvi first, I think is what obviously everybody would be intrigued in based on kind of how everything lines up here. Jesse Puljujarvi is the hottest topic in Edmonton, I think, right now, because the Oilers need to clear cap space. They need to obviously move on from a player that just is not doing anything of substance in terms of a lot of people's eyes within the organization and from the fan base. And for the Oilers, that means trade, that means waivers, that means anything. But what Chris Johnston mentioned today in this Chris Johnston show on the SDPN is simply put, the Oilers have broached. And this is a big term, all right? For those of you that don't know English, kind of like me, let's take a second to get the definition of broached underway. Broached defined as raise a sensitive or difficult subject for discussion. So in this sentence, that's what you got to keep in mind. The Oilers have broached a possible extension with Jesse Puljujarvi. We're talking the Oilers have in the past week, while all of this craziness going on about putting them on waivers, trading them, trying to make room for Kyler Yamamoto, somewhere in that, Ken Holland found time, whether it was substantial or not, to call Jesse Puljujarvi's agent and say, hey, what would you think about an extension in Edmonton? And this is kind of one of those things. Hold on, take the 3D cube approach here, or 4D cube, or whatever the heck the actual term is I'm trying to come up with. Like I said, I don't know my English very well. If you've watched long enough, you know that. But it's one of those things from the outside looking in. Why would the Oilers want to do that? And of course, my Bakersfield contact, who's very heavily invested in the guys that have come up through the Bakersfield Condors system, like a Jesse Puljujarvi, like a Dylan Holloway, like a Vinny Desharnais, all those great guys that we have on the roster or have been on the roster this year. The reason I cheer for all of them very much so is because I get to see them through another lens, somebody else's point of view, and it's very powerful. But from that point of view, down there in Bakersfield, it's like, well, wouldn't that make it easier to trade them if they've got a cost certainty on what his next year is going to look like? Because yes, Puljujarvi at the end of this year is not a UFA, he's an RFA. If the Oilers cut ties with him and don't qualify him, he will become a UFA. But if the Oilers trade him, for the team trading for him, that will then be their problem to figure out an extension. And I think what Ken Holland's strategy might have been in this, the Bakersfield contact sitting here telling me what's up, is, well, you know what, why not try and generate a little cost certainty? Now, it's not that an extension happened, it's not that an extension is going to happen, but the Oilers raised a difficult question simply because, well, it could be beneficial in that point of view to trade talks. And that's not necessarily exactly why it was raised either. That's just a theory as to why it could have been raised up. But for the Oilers, right, there's kind of these 4D chess moves happening here when it comes down to everything, simply for the sake of you got to have all the bases covered. And I think the beautiful part about what we are seeing from Ken Holland approaching this NHL trade deadline is every time, right, we run into a trouble spot, every time we run into a situation where we got to do this, we got to do that, he somehow finds a way out and does something else. Well, now, right, we get report that Jesse Puljujarvi has been talked extension with for the Oilers. That's just another wrinkle, layer to the puzzle of how Ken Holland's going to figure out this trade deadline. Because for Puljujarvi, right, he's coming off 36 points last year, has 12 this year. You add on that, well, he's not going to get $3 million again this year. And the Oilers, if they sign him to something, say 1.6, 1.75, well, guess what? That suddenly makes it a lot easier, A, to trade him, but also to keep him under the cap. And that's where my kind of theory would come in too, is for the Oilers and Puljujarvi, if he is to stick around, if he is to stay here, and like I said, these talks, as far as Chris Johnston said, went nowhere. If yes, Puljujarvi is to stick around, it's got to be at a lower cap. It's got to be at a prove it, show it, earn it kind of thing. But of course, we get no deals on terms, dollars. It's just that Ken Holland raised the question with Jesse Puljujarvi and his representation simply to, who knows, right? That's as far as it goes. Everything up to there, we just go and what the heck else was these conversations about? Sorry, my phone just dinged, but what were these conversations meant to do? What were they for? Why did they happen? And that's the beautiful part about this term broached, is the Oilers, from Chris Johnston's point of view and from what he heard, just basically raised a question to get an answer. And that's not a bad thing either, because we need to have as many answers as we possibly can going into the trade deadline this year, and that being now less than 2 weeks away. So that's the Jesse Puljujarvi covered off. Also on the Chris Johnston show is the other day, and this video was kind of oddly timed because it was my fault. I posted it during the first period, not during the first period intermission, like even in the video I said I was going to. I just hit public a little bit too soon, and you can't take a video back after it's already public. You can, but it doesn't work the same like it should. So what I did was the Patrick Kane, he's open to coming to Edmonton. He might want to come to Edmonton. He thinks that it's a possibility after New York closed on him, and now that Toronto's also closed on him this weekend. Well, here's the thing. Edmonton, according to Chris Johnston's sources, whether it be third, fourth party information, whatever he mentioned there in this SDPN podcast, is the fact that right now Edmonton's sniffing around, right? This is kind of where we started with Erik Carlson a couple of weeks ago. Is the Oilers are sniffing around. They're kicking tires. They're trying to figure out what the price might be. And that was where we are now this weekend with, of course, Patrick Kane. Is the Oilers are sniffing around. They're trying to figure out what the costs are going to be. They're trying to figure out, hey, what's it looking like? But of course, Chris Johnston comes back after saying that to basically say, look at this. The Oilers are also kind of having to realize that it's, would Patrick Kane be willing to waive, and would he be willing to waive to go to the Chicago Blackhawks to Edmonton Oilers situation? That's where it is kind of deal, right? Is he willing to waive and is he willing to go to Edmonton? Sorry, my phone's just absolutely blowing up, and I don't know if I should check Twitter. Maybe I should. I don't know if the Oilers have recalled somebody or what. Doesn't look like it at all. No Oilers talk here, but we'll get back to the video. Sorry, friends. That's life in the fast lane, I guess you could say. But for the Oilers, right, is, again, signs are that they are doing their homework, they are taking their time, and they are trying to figure things out. And that's what we know with Ken Holland. I might get upset with it. I know a lot of other Oilers fans are upset with it, and I think for fair reason. Is why give up an extra point when you don't need to, when you could get that extra point by having that extra guy in the lineup. Fair enough, move the cap, get better, whatever. But Ken Holland, by every account, is not looking to go out there, and this is what Chris Johnston said, trade a fourth round pick for a rental player. No, Chris Johnston is looking to make a splash. Ken Holland, according to Chris Johnston, is looking to make a splash here. Ken Holland doesn't want to just settle for good enough. Ken Holland wants great. And obviously when you want great, that's because you're trying to achieve greatness. And that's what the Oilers are trying to do this spring, this summer. And that's where it comes together for them right now is Ken Holland has to have all the homework in check, right? Whether it be, hey, can we get cost certainty on Puljujarvi? Would he allow us to do that? Would he be open to sticking around if it doesn't happen? B, are you wanting a guy like, I don't know, like Gavrikhov's a bad instance. I don't think there is a good instance. Maybe Noel Akari there, if he hadn't gone to the Leafs, would have been a good example of what the Oilers could have picked up for cheap. But when you look at it, right, is top down, bottom situation for the Oilers. You're not looking for the fourth line grinder that's going to spend 12 minutes on the ice just hitting in the neutral zone and defensive zone. No, we're looking for a guy who's going to put pucks in the net like Evander Kane did in the playoffs for us. And B, we're looking for a defenseman who's going to lead the way offensively and be able to play upper echelon NHL defense. And by that, I mean, realistically, Erik Carlson, he might not be the best defenseman. He might not even be in the top 25 in terms of best defensive defensemen in the NHL. But guess what? When it comes to this Oilers defense, Erik Carlson is a defensive upgrade. That's what we're talking. You want to be realistic? That's a realistic point of view. And when it comes down to it, right, Ken Holland is out there doing his homework, looking at it, taking into account, and okay, you know what? We want to make a splash, but you can't just make a splash to make a splash because it usually backfires. And that's where us Oilers fans find ourselves, is in this limbo period right now where Ken Holland's got us hanging on threads, listening to reports of potentially Puljujarvi extension talk, listening to reports that the Oilers are now just as interested as I always screw that up, as interested as Patrick Kane potentially is in a trade, and well, all of this unfolding while we've got the Erik Carlson news going pretty quiet over the past 2-3 days. Friends, I'm Tyson. This is Dolly TV. I could ramble on all afternoon. I got nothing to do. Come on. Saturday, it's getting crappier weather out. It's going to start snowing tomorrow. It's going to snow all week here in southern Alberta. Of course, it'll probably be plus 20 and sunny by Wednesday, but we don't mind that, and we won't worry about that until Wednesday. But that's where we find ourselves. Game tomorrow at 1 p.m. And guess what, my friends? You have two options this weekend in terms of your local Edmonton Oilers YouTubers covering off coverage live here on YouTube, as Patrick from the Oilers Fanatic alongside Toff there will be going hard on their coverage. Of course, that's the beauty of this, is I've developed my own little brand and they've got their own little brand, and it serves the market so well, right? They have a great little commentary back and forth between them. I'm just ripping the play-by-play here, and we've got you covered on all angles for the rematch. Colorado, Edmonton. Of course, that game went to overtime. Cale Makar ended it as Patrick and I sat at Bogies and Airdrie and had to listen to the bartender drill us down about Stuart Skinner. It is what it is, but when the bartender's got a sign that says bartender's always right is rule number 1. Rule number 2, if the bartender is wrong, please see rule number 1. You ain't going to argue much, and hey, it is a Saturday night out in Airdrie a few weeks ago. Friends, I'm Tyson. This is Dolly TV. I tried to get out of here a minute ago. I'm just rambling. I'm just telling you stories at this point. I'm up on out of here.